Hi, I'm Embers. I use he, him.
Hi, I'm Haley. I use she, her.
Hi, I'm Jerika. I use she, her.
And I'm Leap. I use he, him. And you're listening to Insight Check, where we delve into the dungeons of your bad decisions and retrieve the treasure of wisdom.
Wisdoms. Woo. Let's just pluralize everything.
Yay! Wisdom's
And the
plural.
crowd goes wild.
It's really yeah.
Welcome to this episode. We will be talking about things that you're interested in. Stay tuned.
We hope.
Stay tuned.
Actually, be interested. You don't have a choice. You have to be interested.
Or it could be one of those things where you listen to it now and say, hey, that's not that interesting. But then 5 years later, whole different part of your life. New friends, new job. You're like, oh my, it all makes sense.
Get it now.
It all makes sense now.
That Jerika said on that show. I get it.
I get it.
Before we dive in, one, it's really great to be
Welcome
back.
back. Woo.
There's been a podcast-shaped hole in my life. And to get me back up to speed, I would love to hear what's going on in the world of Dungeons and Dragons for you all.
Well, we have a segment for that.
It's called
Dungeon Crawl.
Well, I've been eagerly anticipating a chance to do another dungeon crawl because we don't do it all the time, and I'm constantly driving to and from work thinking of songs that I can bastardize to intro our dungeon crawls.
Oh, do you have one?
I do.
I'm ready to be serenaded.
I am going to try my best to serenade in a fashion.
My whole rib front is oscillating with excitement.
This was a dungeon. I'm making a note here. We all died in a pit of acid putrefaction. DM compliance.
Oh my god.
We should have rolled stealth and stuck to plan. Now
God, yes.
our clerics turn to dust and still the zombies undead. But there's no sense crying over each missed attack. You just keep on seeking after a Serarak. And the quest it gets done. Why a cult is so fun for the people who aren't still alive.
Oh my god.
beautiful. It's my favorite.
Actually, tears running down my face. I love that song so much.
Oh,
Gladys will
It was
live
a
in our
triumph,
hearts.
Embers. It was a triumph.
holy Moses.
Huge
My
success.
eyeballs.
From my heart to yours.
Oh. And because that was so wonderful, you get to go first. Tell me your dungeon.
Well, I've just been workshopping this for like the past 2 months. The end.
But
It shows. It's perfect.
you're traveling soon, yeah? Wow.
I am traveling.
Down the 93 corridor.
For me, it's not far. For me, I'll be traveling in an Uber, but I'm excited for people traveling greater distances and coming to PAX East.
Wow. Content warning, screaming, and fireworks. Also pyrotechnics.
Matey. No,
And pirates!
I'm very excited to be going to PAX East. I'm going to go all 4 days this year, which is something that I will possibly regret later. I'm very excited to be looking forward to now, and I'm building a meta itinerary and hoping to meet up with lots of people in the communities of D&D, TTRPGs, video games, and video games.
Are you
And
cosplaying this con?
so I have a D&D Raps cosplay that is ready.
Nice.
What? Are
You're
you
just
freaking
gonna
kidding
put
me?
put a record on your face?
Kind of, basically. If
We're going to wear it
if
around
not
your
my
neck.
face, other body parts.
Good, great, very general.
The nipples. There you go. Yeah.
It's a family program. No,
Is it? No, it's not.
It's not a family program.
Especially with the content I'm bringing into this dungeon crawl.
If you're a child, turn this off
may
now.
not be suitable for all audiences.
Douglas, cover your ears.
He's been earmuffed this whole time.
I'm going to do that, and I'm going to have unreleased tracks and EPs on flash drives to hand out to people who are into that sort of thing, and some new some new collaborations and some new stuff that we've been working on. I don't know if I'm going to redo Trico because I need a handler for that, and I don't have one yet. I am working on 2 other cosplays that are sort of TBD, but one is from Penny Arcade Canon. I don't want to kind of spoil it yet. Not from the comic, but from one of their productions, one of their creative products. And the other is a C-Team PC character, but that has morphed into a project that may go until next PAX East, both due to complexity and honestly due to budgetary reasons too. So I'll do some cosplaying, but I'm going to be going a couple days, maybe at least one day with just friends, just as me, and seeing folks. I'm really excited for that.
Sweet.
Oh, cool.
Great.
Super exciting.
Yeah.
I can't wait to. I am actually missing PAX East for the first time in years.
But
So I
why?
look forward to.
It's for a really cool
I'm
reason.
going to China. It's very
That's
cool.
amazing.
I get to go to China and do the other thing that I spend a lot of time doing, which is dance-related things. So I will go to maybe the polar opposite of PAX. So like lots of dresses and makeup and hairspray and rhinestones.
I mean, that sounds like Anna Prosser's PAX.
Yeah,
but that's
it
okay.
That's true. I mean, I guess it could be PAX. It's just like an elaborate cosplay.
Could be.
maybe. Could be.
Groovy.
But I will be in China doing that, so I will
VOD Squad.
look forward to.
Hashtag VOD Squad.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I will look forward to hearing about it after the fact and scoping out all your pictures.
That's so rad.
Nice, nice. Jerika, do you have a dungeon crawl for us?
I do.
Can you share it with
Yes,
me?
I can.
I'm really
It's
excited.
from Twitter.
Ooh.
This is turned into an ASMR cast. It's okay. All right. From Natelite Dish on February 28th, 2019. A D&D playing friend challenged me to pitch them other TTRPG systems as if they were Tinder boys.
Oh.
my God.
Let me read you
yes.
just 2 examples.
Just 2?
Yes, well, there's 4 in this post and more below. Apocalypse World, skull emoji, flame emoji. My world is fire and blood. Flame emoji, skull emoji. Looking for someone to help piece my world back together. Giving lasts forever,
Nice.
but that don't mean we shouldn't try. There you go, there's one. Blades in the Dark.
Oh, God.
Seeking more for group fun dash, must love rollicking, japery, dastardly mischief, and have a high tolerance for stress. The sun is gone and the city is dark, but maybe we can light a fire in each other's hearts. Oh, I love it. Okay, yeah, so that's my dungeon crawl.
I would probably be ready to
That's
roll with that
amazing.
second one. I like it.
A really good thread.
Yeah, I want to swipe. I can't.
Which way, though?
Just swipe in
I don't
front of
know.
the
I just want to
computer
swipe, you
screen.
guys. I've never swiped before, all right?
I've never
I was out of the
swiped.
game before the swiping. I actually don't want to swipe. That sounds like way too much for me right now.
It's a lot.
Yeah, but that is amazing. That is so funny. We're gonna have to, Jerika. We'll be sure to share that with our good
Heck yeah.
friends. Oh heck yeah!
Share your news of the internet.
Crack open that sternum and let us have it.
Crack open your sternum.
Crack open that sternum. It is already.
You're oscillating sternum. Oh gosh. Now I wish that my joints cracking was on the podcast.
Oh
but
man,
it was
I
not
wish I could do it for our good listeners. This is such a deep cut that this joke happened before we started recording.
It was Sternum
But
Cast.
I wish. Welcome to Sternum Cast. I wish I could crack it loud enough that everyone could hear, but instead of doing that, I will do that thing that we do sometimes, and I'm talking about the future, but for you, my good listener, it is the past. And we are, by the time that this comes out, we will have just played our second game of our Small Folk campaign on our Insight Check Pod Presents Twitch stream. And it's actually, we have 2 tables that we're running currently, and it's going to be the first game of our second table. And we had to postpone because I had a very sick little bab for the first time, but we were able to get everyone back to the table. And I am just super excited because it is, I don't know, I've been really excited to just play with a lot of really good people. And it like Haley's gonna be there.
I get to play.
Oh my God. There's every member of the cast I have been pumped for playing with for a really, really long time. And so I'm just finally excited to sit down and play a little bit of tiny, adventurous Dungeons and Dragons, which happens at basically a Thanksgiving party, which / fair. So I'm kind of excited for all of that.
I'm really excited. I get to be a mouse. Her name's Nutella.
I love that name. It's the best name.
I'm obsessed. I'm also a cleric who's surprised.
Not me.
Not me either. And actually, I feel like that's we had to postpone the original Small Folk game for our crew, as Leap said, for family reasons. And I think that's a really great way to bring us into our topic for tonight's podcast, which is how do you all balance gaming and D&D and also just other obligations. There's so much content out now that it's, I think, at least for me, recently it's been very easy to be overwhelmed by it all and to find the time to do things like play for D&D for a few hours with your friends. So let's, what are your all thoughts?
I've got some thoughts.
Give me those brain thoughts.
Yeah, so for me, it's definitely challenging. Like I have all these real life responsibilities and stuff, as many people do, and I have limitations in time, and as many people do. So for me, playing is pretty rare, and so I've been looking for ways to really kind of think about on a monthly basis when I can give myself time to still play games, and then find some time to still consume creative works from this world that I really like. And I can do those in different times in different ways. But from the playing side or the DMing side, one of the things that has helped me is being very honest with myself that there's probably a limit on a monthly basis about, how much I can do and make it all work. Because the one thing that I am always most afraid of and what I most want to avoid is I don't want my love for a game, be it D&D, be it some other game or creative outlet for me. It could be improv for somebody else, singing or music for somebody else. I don't want that to become associated with stress from other areas of life that don't get the attention that they need. Like I'm distracted from my job and not doing as well on that or something, or I forget to do laundry or get groceries. Like I don't want to start to build associations with these creative outlets that I love and some sort of negative sacrifice that I feel guilt over or which harms me in another way. So I try to be very cautious of that and use that as my guiding light and say it should always be untethered from the real world, and I should be able to give it the space to breathe and experience it without feeling the pressures of the real world around me. And if I can't, then that's okay. There will be another time. So that's sort of my step one, is to be okay with that, and also try not to overextend myself and make big commitments that will then balloon out of proportion from what I can do, which is something I think is easy to say, very challenging to do.
That all sounds reasonable.
It's just, I find that it's hard. So I have that, the thought. I feel like I've gotten to the point where I have those thoughts around this. I know that I should be reasonable about what I can do, but I feel like I tend to be a little bit all or nothing with things, and this isn't just gaming. It's like everything that I do in my life. Like when I was dancing competitively, I practiced 7 days a week for 2 to 3 hours a day. And I really didn't do anything other than dance. And now that I don't dance anymore and just teach, I now do a lot of D&D stuff. And so it's been hard to figure out, even though I can have that thought process around, I have X amount of time that I have to spend working and spend commuting, and I've got friends and family that I need to see. Sometimes it's hard to do something in a happy medium way for me. Yeah,
totally. I'd say one thing. So I've tried to coach, even though I have no experience in coaching, and I doubt myself a good one. But I've coached a couple of people through tough times in their life where they're finding that they're always exhausted, super overworked, don't feel like they're getting enough done, and they feel like they almost feel guilty if they take a moment out for themselves, and that kind of becomes a little bit of a negative snowballing cycle.
You're calling me out, Embers.
No, I don't even. I think I call myself out too. But what helps them and me is when I find myself like in that situation where I am struggling in that way, it's because something has changed. Like I'm off equilibrium or whatever, and I'm not smart enough to figure out why. So what I've done is I sit down for 2 weeks and I try to do like a little time accounting study of my life in that moment where I'm struggling with time and stress and commitments. And from when I wake up to when I go to sleep, I try to get a sense of like, how many hours am I sleeping and when, how much work am I doing and when. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but to start to think about how I'm spending that time, I almost always find, at least just for myself, that I'm finding time slipping through cracks, like a little bit here, a little bit there. And when I realize that, it sometimes helps me understand why that might be happening, why I might be doing that to myself, or why maybe I've committed to a weekly lifestyle or a daily lifestyle that's leaving me stretched too thin or worn out or whatever it is. But it helps me just to like almost be like a little accountant for time and remove myself from the situation and start looking at the numbers. It's really dry sounding, but that's actually helped me. And so if you're struggling with like the balance of all things and you find it impinging on your gaming life and your ability to enjoy D&D and really lose yourself in the creative process of adventuring as a character in a TTRPG or in role playing in general, just understanding where your time is going for me has been a good first step.
That would probably be valuable.
And then there are lots of little time hacks you can do once you found, holy cow, I'm spending like 4 hours a day doing this one thing. And at the end of a month, I feel like I haven't achieved my goals related to that one thing. Then you can start to, put the pieces back together and say, here might be areas where I could change the way I do it or reevaluate that decision, or maybe say to myself, this is something that might have to wait, but I know why I'm going to delay it or postpone it. Like I had this cosplay project that I was working on in earnest and I had to pause it, and I'm kind of pausing it until the summer because I looked at all my time commitments and said the situation is very hairy right now, but I think it's probably going to be very intense and in-depth through April. So maybe by the end of May, I'll be able to revisit this, give it the attention and enjoy doing it and enjoy putting time into that, because it won't feel like I'm robbing these other things that are going to be angry at me for not spending that time on them.
That makes a ton of sense.
Those are my time hacks.
I think with Dungeons and Dragons especially, it's like there's a bunch of different ways. Like I feel like there's different kinds of games out there. There are those games that happen weekly or bi-weekly. And then I've been a part of those. And up until recently, it was, well, you just had to make it to the table, right? So that's kind of a double-edged sword in that the one way you knew that, okay, Wednesday at 8:30, we were playing. And so having that kind of window of time always kind of put away allowed everyone, as long as everyone is able to kind of adjust their schedule as necessary to get there, if that's the priority, right? What I found interesting is my home game has been played with the same guys over like 10 years, just different campaigns and things. And what has become more and more obvious is that our time has had to become more flexible. So we still try and play every Wednesday or Thursday, but just because it's all remote now instead of all being in the same hometown, and because we all have families and we all have a whole whack of different jobs, there are just some weeks where we just don't have the numbers. And at the beginning, there was a pressure there. Like we felt bad about it, like that we were letting each other down, or especially if you're like the person who will decide whether or not a table is playing. But then collectively, we just kind of decided that, you know what, this is just the way that we play now. And it more became a thing that people are going to be online. And if we don't have the numbers, whoever's around just kind of hangs out. And so that's really been a way that has lowered the pressure for a lot of us, myself included, who can't always make it there, right? So I would say for a lot of people who have a weekly game, if you are feeling pressure because of that consistent weekly schedule, maybe there's a conversation that needs to happen with everyone at the table, because people might also be feeling the same way. Or it's always hard to say, maybe there's another game that will better fit your time frame, but there might be a better game that is out to fit your time frame, right? Because like Ember said, like this is supposed to be a thing of joy, right? And it's just really hard when the thing that you want to enjoy as your like release valve, or you know, your creative expression becomes the number one stressor in your life.
Yeah, I totally feel that. And it's, you know, it's like I feel very mixed, in a mixed sort of way. I don't know how to say this. I'm using the wrong words. Conflicted? No, I don't know. This is the wrong word. I'll just skip the word and talk. But I haven't played really since our F-list game ended. And when we were playing that, it was a weekly game, and it was Sundays, and you just sort of carved out the time. And apparently Sunday nights, like the one time that I can carve out time consistently. But now that the game's over, it has like let me catch up on a lot of things that I didn't realize I was like neglecting during that time. And it's made it sort of hard to decide that like I can take on another weekly game. It actually sort of like, I don't know. I don't want D&D to become like, you don't want it to feel like a chore, right?
Oh, totally.
Because I think sometimes when you get really into something and you're trying to keep up with it all the time, and you feel the need to keep up with it all the time, it can take on not like an unintentional bitterness, and I don't want that to end up happening in my gaming, because that's what happened to me in dancing, because I was dancing, as I said, 6 days a week all the time, and I didn't have any friends who didn't dance, and I didn't do anything that wasn't dance, and then eventually I didn't want to do it anymore because I was so burnt out.
Yeah.
And so it's like balance is that thing that I've struggled with, right?
I have to say that I don't know if I have any like really good advice. I think I do a lot of things wrong. But I've noticed it more and more, so I guess I'm becoming more mindful of the things that I do that are bad.
Would you, so like, feel free to say no to this, right? And if that's the case, we'll just edit this part right out. What kind of things have you noticed then?
So I've been turtling really hard this winter, and by that I mean
Me too.
just not going anywhere. Sitting in front of my computer and watching Netflix a lot. I really like to have a couple nights free in my schedule, and the more that I commit blocks of time other places in my week, I feel like I need to have free time elsewhere.
Oh, like a balance.
I don't know if it's like 1-to-1, but like definitely I need like space.
Recoup downtime kind of.
Yeah, like watch my Legend of Korra time.
Thank you for sacrificing your Korra time. We love you, Jerika.
There'll be Korra time later.
Good.
But I think the worst thing that I've noticed is that if I have something scheduled, it's very hard for me to let go of it if something's going wrong, or something has changed in my schedule. So there's 2 instances in the past couple weeks where the way that I stop feeling anxious about something when plans change is I replace it with something that's very, very similar. And I don't know if that's super healthy, but that's been my reaction. So
I don't think that's unhealthy in the way that because I am someone who also gets super bummed if I've been looking forward to something for a long time, or even just mentally prepared to do something on a day, right? And set myself up and set my day up around it, or even just like it was a fact of my existence for a little bit of time, right? And,
I tend to say like, what's the next thing, right? So today, March 7th, the next thing for me is I have a staff meeting early tomorrow. I have to file some really important paperwork tomorrow, and then I have small folk tomorrow, and those are like my next steps, immediate. And those are defined by sort of things that are different than ground state, if you will.
Totally.
Yeah. I don't know if you do the same thing, but anyway.
I think that's interesting. I find that, so I feel like I've been, the last couple of years for me, like have had a lot of change. Like I used to have like a very regimented schedule for a little while. Like there were some times where felt like, like every hour of my week was accounted for.
Yeah.
Because I was dancing, I was working 2 jobs, I was meeting and attempting to date. Like I met Bennett during that period, and I have no idea why he didn't go like, this girl has the craziest schedule on earth, and I'm gonna go elsewhere. I'm glad he didn't. He's great. But like, I mean, there were times where I would come from dance practice to get together with him at like 9:30 at night, and he would be like, here's some dinner that I made you, please eat. And I'd be like, great, I'm going to go to bed now. And like, that was just a weird like time. And so I've kind of gone in the opposite direction, but I've felt like without some of that like rigorous routine, I've lost my efficiency.
Oh no.
I get that.
And so now, and it's like, I don't want to go back to being like a crazy overscheduled person where if you want to make plans with me, you need to make them a month and a half to 2 months in advance, like, or else I'm not going to be free. But at the same time, like now that I've gotten used to like not doing stuff, sometimes I get like really into not doing stuff. Yeah. And so like I make plans and then I don't want to do them, or or it's like the opposite thing. I'll have like one plan for the week, but like I'm really not feeling it. And like self-care wise, it would be better to be like, no, I'm not going to do that. And then like to have to say no to it creates even more anxiety for me. Whereas before I felt like maybe it was that I felt like my reasoning was more valid when I could say like, I've had 15 things that I've had to do in the last 3 days and like I need some downtime. And now it's just like, I'm not feeling great. I'm not going to do it. And so that like creates some additional struggle for me.
It can. I think it's always very important when you're dealing with, or when you're starting to feel more stress, more pressure, not to prejudge it in a way. And I'm just speaking from what I do, not to prejudge it in a way where you say to yourself, it's silly for you to feel stressed about this stuff. You're not that busy, or it's not that bad, or, any of the ways that you can, or I can talk myself out of acknowledging and respecting how I feel, because whether or not any of that's true, it never proves to be the most effective way for me to find myself to a better place. So it's kind of like, if I find myself not getting a lot of stuff done, not having a lot of commitments, and still feeling crummy or what have you, my first sense is to kind of get down on myself and be hard on myself about that. One of the things that I've tried to be a little bit more disciplined about doing is saying that it's okay to feel that way, and not to get on my own back about it, but to just try and, give it a little bit of space to breathe, and to let myself tell myself why that might be.
That's very Zen, Embers. It's like taking the negative feelings off of it and try to solve the problem and not make
but not like
negative.
Overanalyze it too much.
Yeah, I try. So yeah, that's like the masterclass that I'm still trying to learn, is not to just dive into it with a bunch of sharpened knives and trying to dissect it, but like let it unwrap itself and present itself. And sometimes that's a more natural way for me to understand. And this is me only on my very, very best days, like understand, what it might be, and not to attach a bunch of strain and emotion to it, but, maybe just like sit with it and have a conversation and say, how can we get to a better place?
So I have a question for you guys.
Us?
Yeah.
Please.
For you folk who can reply to this. The listener, I have a question for you too, but you're not here currently. So, but I said you guys, so listener, I guess this is for you as well. You can at me with your response, or develop a time machine. And once you do, please join
Hi,
us.
I'm the listener that you were talking to.
Break into our secret chat and recording
But anyway,
channel.
people of the future, Leap has a question.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to a table that is either a single person is feeling this pressure stress, or the culture of the table has gotten to a space where the organizing of people to get to the game has become a stressor and a deterrent of the enjoyment of the game? Because I think a lot of long-term campaigns, or even just like, you know, I just think that this is a pretty natural occurrence that happens at a table. And I've seen campaigns end just through apathy, not because of anyone not wanting to play, but just because after a while, the timing doesn't work and people are used to playing week after week after week. And then the momentum changes and then everyone just kind of loses interest, right? So
There is a season. Turn.
God, you got me.
I mean, I don't
you got me so good.
think, like,
That was so good.
people expect their, and part of your question is an incredibly practical question, so I don't want to forget about it, but I do want to make the point that I definitely don't go into D&D games expecting them to last an eternity.
That is fair.
And I think that, games have a life cycle, and it can just be that the game's time has passed.
Totally.
Spring has passed into summer, and now we must find new people to play with. But yes, I think that there's a sort of a natural ending and then maybe a forced ending or something where maybe some changes can be made before, you have to say goodbye. And I think for people who are feeling like their D&D is contributing to their stress, I think having a conversation with the whole group is really important. It's possible that other players are also feeling that way, which is why I'm not restricting it just to the DM.
Totally.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point. Like, to bring it back to the practical side, Jerika, that you mentioned as well, I think it's something that I've seen at more experienced tables from players who have been in campaigns, or DMs who have been in campaigns that have begun and ended and moved on to other campaigns. But bringing up the question of, is this still something we all want to keep as a priority commitment? Is this game still where we are all at? Mm-hmm. Does it make sense to reevaluate this game? Because that's a conversation that can be hard for a person to start.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Especially if they have not been in many campaigns that have had their own natural beginnings, middles, and ends.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But it can really help to de-stress the situation and to start that conversation. I think it's a good point.
One of the things I was going to say as well, that was like maybe a similar thing or like a way to alleviate some of this stress, is like the way that people handle or the way that people react to or deal with when people do have to like cancel, like things come up. And I feel like if things come up for somebody and there's like obviously I'm not talking about like things coming up with someone like every other week and last minute cancellations all the time, because that's like a different conversation. But if things come up and someone needs to bow out and it's at the last minute and it's sort of handled in a like non-dramatic fashion, or like that's cool, like next time
Understanding.
we'll see you.
Empathy.
Being understanding of people's schedules and the fact that like people might have stressors and things and maybe they can't make the game the priority that week. Because I think sometimes, like, especially since this is something that people love, like the first reaction that people have can be fairly, like sometimes can be fairly negative. I think the last thing that someone wants to do is feel like Leap, something that you said earlier was like, it's hard when, you know, you're the person that makes the game not be able to happen. And like, that can be really negative. And I think if people feel negatively about that, that it might make it harder for them to have the conversation about like, hey, my schedule is changing and I need to evaluate this. As opposed to like, if everyone's got a little bit of empathy about the realities of everyday life, then it might make it easier when the situation arises to have those conversations. I don't know. What do you all think about that?
For my very long game that I played in person, it was never just one person that we would cancel for. It would be, you know, we had a group text, and if somebody couldn't make it, they'd let us know as soon as they knew. And then it was always okay, we'll still run if it's just one person out. If it was 2 or 3, then we would talk about what we would like to do instead, if we'd like to modify the game. So it was never like saying, oh, you weren't there, you were the one that, you know, killed it for everyone else. You know, at least there were 2 people
right.
at least, you know, who were commiserating. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's just important to think about like the words that are used around that and like the way that it's phrased, because it is hard. Like, you do look forward to something all week and then something happens and like you can't make it. You already feel, that person already feels terrible. I guarantee you they're not just like, let me ruin tonight's D&D game. I will just cancel it on everyone. Ha ha ha. And like,
I'm really excited to make my friends really irritated.
To make my friends really irritated and to disappoint everyone. So like, if they say, hey guys, like this came up and I can't make it anymore, and people were like upset about it, I'll give a non-D&D related example from my personal life. I could not go to bowling last night. Yes. I'm in a bowling league. Other things that people don't know about me. I just had sinus surgery, and my doctor did not clear me to bowl, and told me that was too much physical activity, and I could not do anything until this weekend. And I was like,
I gotta see you folks bowl.
I was like,
total body experience.
Total body experience. Right. Yes.
Face bowling.
Face bowling. We smash our septums into the bowling balls. We'll just talk more about bones and cartilage.
That's somebody's kink anyway. But but you've also expressed over the course of the week that you've liked the time to recover too. So I don't think your doctor was off base. But anyway.
No, he was not. The doctor, I totally agreed with the doctor's decision. I had a fever as well. But 2 of my bowling teammates are already away, traveling on business. So it was just me and one other person. And so I write to this person and say, I'm really sorry, I can't bowl tonight. And I know that no one was able to sub because we had already tried to find substitutes for the other 2 people who are going to be there. And his response was, we can't take any points and we have to forfeit if you don't come, so that's great. And then he responded not in the personal text to me, then he wrote to the whole team and said, since Haley can't go, there's no point in me going, so I'm not going to go. And I was so angry and upset about it. And like, now I don't even want to go next week. Like, because I don't want to deal.
Yeah, it seemed like a lot of like guilt, a heavy guilt trip. Maybe
it was a lot of guilt on me, like placed onto me, and I think some of it is this person's methods of communication are not the same methods of communication that I would prefer. There's my nice way of saying it. I do not think that this was like had a malicious intent at all, and I think that this is a good like thing that might come up in people's games. Like, I'm sure he really was looking forward to bowling since last week. And he probably really wanted to bowl and was really frustrated. And no one wants to show up for a thing that's supposed to be a 4-person thing and be alone either. And be by yourself for something that's not going to matter. So, like, I was able to find some empathy in there eventually. But, like, this is the sort of reaction that I want to say, like, you should never have at your table. Like, please do not say, since Haley can't play, we can't play. F Haley. She's ruined the game. Right. Because then the next time I can't bowl, I'm going to be anxious about the fact that, like, I'm going to be given a hard time for needing to take care of myself. So.
Right. And if I know anything about bowling, and I don't, it's that you need to harmonize your
You need 3 lizards.
mind,
you need to be upside down.
mind, body, and
you need
soul.
to face north, have crystal. I'm sorry, I'm done.
You need your chi to be flowing in the right way, and if you're thinking in the back of your head, oh, there's Chet over there, and he's pissed at me because I missed 2 weeks ago, and we have this
looking at me.
Yeah, exactly.
we have this beef that we haven't settled. You can't
Chet.
align your energies to bowl.
Your
My nose chakras are unaligned. No, I mean, it's not cool when you're like
How will they oscillate?
irritated with your oscillating.
But
How do they
would
oscillate? But no, I mean, honestly, like, I've had enough unpleasant experiences with this person that, like, he's my teammate, and when he does poorly, I am secretly happy. Like, it's not a good, it's not a good situation, because
There's
when
no hate in team.
yeah, I know. I'm
Except this
except
team.
for this team.
There's a lot of hate.
I know it's really not good. I have not admitted this to anybody before right now, or really to myself, but it's true, because when he does well, he gloats about it. He's just not.
Oh man!
Don't be. We're
We're
gonna
sore
call him
winners.
Chet. Don't be like Chet. Hopefully, he doesn't listen
be
to
like Chet.
D&D.
Can
Not
I-
like D&D or listen to this podcast. I doubt it.
We're really peeling the Chet onion, and I'm just starting to tear up now.
Yeah. So
But you make a really good point though that I think is important very broadly. Like communicating interpersonally by voice is hard, by text is hard, by chat is hard, by
Chet is hard.
by Chet is
it's
hard, really
always-
hard.
Especially if you have bad news.
Right.
Yeah, like there are there's a lot of cues that people interpret or misinterpret when we're talking, and that's when we're talking face to face. And then if you go on like Discord or Slack or text or whatever, it gets much harder. And it's important that if you're dealing with stress at the table, or you think there's something unspoken at the table, that if you're going to try to broach that subject, just try to listen. Try to listen to how people are presenting things, because for a great many people, myself included, it's hard to communicate a message without miscommunicating a part of it, or without
especially
giving a
via
mixed
text.
signal that you don't intend. Yeah.
Oh, totally.
Like Grandmother Willow says, listen with your heart. You will understand.
Oh, thank you so much.
God, that's twice down.
Oh, it's so
I wasn't
good.
ready.
I wasn't ready for it either. Oh.
May I give an example of like I'm going to call it the anti-Chet method.
Yeah, please. Let's give a positive example, because I was going to be like, it's like that shitty friend you had in college who, when you didn't want to go out to parties, just gave you a hard time about it all the time. That's
Oh God, yeah, the Chets of the world. So this is what we're going to refer to as the anti-Chet, and we talked about this a little bit actually, but my family. We had to reschedule the small folk game, and it was entirely because of me, and because of just sickness and stress at home in my family. And from the DM's perspective, there was a lot of pressure I felt on my end, because I knew how excited everyone was to be at the table. I was so excited, and it came down to the minute that we were going to go on for like our pre-show, right? We were all just going to get together for the first time and hang out and talk and just be like super excited together. And instead I had to come on late and tell people that because of everything that was going on at home, I wasn't going to be able to be there. And that meant that the game had to be postponed. And everyone's response was incredibly empathetic. It was just really, really nice and relieving on my end that I didn't have to worry about the pressure and the stress that I was giving other people. As soon as I said that it was like, there's just a lot of stress at home, and there was a lot of family things going on, and we have sick kids, person for person, everyone said, family first, we'll figure it out. You go do what you got to do, man. It's all okay, right? And now, and speaking of that, Douglas needs a bit of a bounce, but it allowed me, it gave me the permission to be like, okay, I actually need to go and do other things, and I wasn't worried about it, which was just so relieving for me.
And
as a person,
what we did instead, we just talked for 2 hours. it was really nice, actually. Like, I think that's the other thing, too. And actually, Jerika, I think this kind of goes back to what you were saying. Like, you try to replace things that you were looking forward to with, like, similar things. Like, we were all excited to play together, and we couldn't play, but instead we could still, like, get together. And still, like, we were still on video chat and still hanging out and doing all of, like, we were just not playing D&D. And obviously, like, Leap couldn't be there. But I think it's good to maybe keep in mind, too, if something comes up with your game, like, maybe there's something else that you can play. Like, or maybe you can just have, like, hanging out time, or you find... I know Jay's like a big fan of playing Codenames, or maybe there's like some other game that you can just pick up easily to replace like your D&D game for the people who can be there. So then you don't have that like hole.
Strip Jenga.
Strip Jenga. Yeah, it's especially perfect via voice.
Just voice.
Just voice.
No video.
That's like the weirdest ASMR game with your friends. It's like I have now knocked over a piece.
Like everyone has their own Jenga pile that they've set up, and they all have to remove the exact same
pieces.
So
this is the podcast we can never do.
I know. We'd be like, all right, I'm removing the third row from the bottom, the middle one, and I'm pushing it halfway, and then I'm taking it out the other side.
Gosh.
I like Jenga.
Descriptive Jenga is kind of creepy to me.
Right?
I don't know.
It's kind of weird. I felt a little uncomfortable when I got halfway through that. I was like, I don't like it.
Yep.
Yeah, it feels very intimate.
That's why I didn't do it in an ASMR voice. It would have become too inappropriate.
Oh, boy.
Something else, yeah.
Better that than a Gilbert Godfrey voice or something.
No, the Gilbert Godfrey voice is better. I'm taking the wood and I'm pushing it through the hole, and it's popping out the other side.
Oh gosh, what have we done?
It's toppling over.
Crash. Oh goodness.
And we're done.
Yes, that's me ending this part of the segment. But I think it is, maybe it is good to have some like backup things that you have in pocket so that you don't have, because I think that's the other thing that's really hard to manage, is that like disappointed feeling and the feeling that everyone else had to go away without their like Friday night plans. Like maybe it was Friday night game night, and then Leap, your kids got sick, and so then Friday night game night was canceled, and then we all just went home instead. Like, that would have been much more sad than, like, I had a really good conversation with some really cool people, and I think our game that we now play tomorrow will be even better because we've, like, had that time to just sort of get to know each other. And no one was disappointed.
It was the best. It was honestly, like, hearing that, first off, the reaction that everyone said was the best, but then knowing that you guys just hung out and just had a blast regardless made the pressure non-existent anymore. So like and like without meaning to, my home game actually just started doing this. Our DM just decided that no matter what, he knew if he was going to be online, he was just going to stay online. So for example, last night we were going to be playing, and they ended up being able to get enough people at the table, but I just knew that I couldn't be there. So I popped online for the first half an hour, and we hung out while someone who was going to be half an hour late got there, and then they could actually start playing. So like, no matter what, I still got hangout time with our friends. The game still happened, and whoever was able to be there still got to enjoy themselves.
It's much more than just the game.
Right. Like, this is social interaction time. This is whatever, even if it's...
And these are... Yeah, these are important people in your life, even if it's through this medium or through this, remote access waypoint on the internet. But like, I think that
API
one of the
friends.
things that I try to remind myself,
Sorry, I'm laughing at my own bad joke.
Is it not a bad joke? But like, you got to stay flexible. Like, I think there is a self-selection sort of vibe where if you want a game that's 4 hours every Friday or Thursday or whatever, like if that's what you're looking for, you should seek it out. Like you should hunt out that goal. But you should also communicate very clearly that, if my name's Chet. I want to bowl in a league. I don't want us to miss any games. It's super important
to
me.
Win.
Discipline. I'm gonna win. And
I'm not very good, but I want to win.
But I'm gonna brag about it when I do well. But like if that's your joy, then ideally you find other people who harmonize with that. But for me, that wouldn't work. So if it's a casual game, if it's more RP heavy, less rules lawyerly, if it's welcoming or event based, understanding what you can comfortably do and what you can accommodate can help a lot. And if things change, it's always better to kind of try and get it out in the open if you can, because if you can communicate it, I think a lot of people, especially in this community, I hope will understand and be excited to help make that work for that person for however long it is that they've got to work through whatever they got to work through. But if you never bring it up, it is hard to understand sometimes, especially because you might be doing it remotely. You might not have like a really deep understanding of what that person does on a day-to-day basis and all that stuff. So if it feels like it's something that's you're afraid or you're hesitant to communicate, that's a work-life balance issue, that's near-term, long-term, whatever it is, it's hard for the rest of the table to help. Not impossible, but it's harder for the rest of the table to help a person if they can't figure that out. And if they can, I think most people that I've been fortunate enough to hang out with want to help and are happy to make that work. And if it's a change in the tempo and the schedule, or if it's having backup plans for your backup plans, those things are okay. Like, you still have fun.
I would like to say, listeners, if any of you decide to try and play remote strip Jenga with your friends,
please tell us.
Please don't use a Gilbert Gottfried voice.
No, definitely invite Gilbert Gottfried.
Invite him.
Tell us how it goes. Don't invite us.
Don't send us pictures. We don't want pictures. No. We just want to know how it goes.
Don't send those.
Oh, goodness. And if you have any other questions or thoughts on this topic, it's clearly very relevant to a lot of us, and I'm sure we're not alone in this. If you have any other questions or thoughts about this, please tweet at us at InsightCheckPod. Would love to hear more thoughts. And I'm going to try some of Edward's suggestions, so maybe I'll circle back, maybe in a dungeon crawl, about how this goes for me.
Ooh.
We might have an opportunity at the end of the month to revisit this conversation.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah,
and you'll also know if I'm more successful if I start appearing on this pod more frequently. It was a joy to be back.
Yay!
It's a joy to be in your presence.
Aw, thank you. Should I see if I remember how to do the outro?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do it.
Hell no.
Go for it.
All right.
Just whatever you forget, just insert Gilbert.
Gilbert. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for this episode, not just a episode, this episode of Insight Check Pod. It was lovely to have you. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, if you could please leave us a review on iTunes, we would greatly appreciate it. And as always, thank you to Amy T. Falcone for our lovely artwork and Vin Swept for the fantastic music that you get to listen to in the beginning and end of this podcast. Answering your cues from our collective A's, this
was
Insight
Check!
Woo!
Hard to clap with a baby, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Great. All right.
Am I starting?
How do we start this? I haven't been here in forever.
Insight chat. No.
Insight chat.
Inside chat.
Insight chat.
Oh no.
Oh, goodness.